Hi students, I'm happy to see you today and show you how we are going to make pinch pots. Our pinch pot seed pods are these super wonderful and cute, oh there goes my electric, seed pods that we create by joining two pinch pots together. And with these seed pods, I'm gonna have you guys turn them into rattles. On your module, there's lots of different examples of them, including pumpkins, seed pods, different pinch forms. There's lots of things for you to be inspired by. So check out the pinch pot gallery page so you can see some inspiring pinch pot seed pods that you're going to be making for this class. So let's get started. So to create our seed pods, we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need our wooden stick, our wooden rib, and our serrated metal rib. That's the one with the teeth. You're also going to need your wooden spoon, your wooden paddling spoon, and this is just a cooking implement that I use in the studio to paddle my pieces. You're gonna need your wire tool to cut the clay. You're gonna need your joining slip that you mixed up previously from another video that you watched on how to do that. So let's get started. I have my canvas covered work surface here. It's brushed off and ready to go. And I can do a couple of things. I can pinch off a chunk of clay just like this. This piece of clay fits right in the palm of my hand. Or I can take my wire tool and take my lump of clay and cut off a section that way. Sometimes I get impatient, so I just grab it with my hands. But a lot of times students prefer to cut the clay off the hump with their wire tool. So you can see here that I'm patting my clay balls, okay, into nice round shape, and I'll do that with the other one. And it's important for them to be the same weight. Okay, so I've got two balls, same size, pretty round, looking good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ball of clay and I'm going to make my first pinch form. The way that I make my first pinch form is I stick my thumb into the clay and make a hole just like that. This gives me a starting point to grab and evenly pinch my pot open. So I just go around and around, thinning my clay out, gentle pinches. I'm not squeezing too hard, and I'm not pinching the rim thin yet. I'm leaving that kind of bulky. And that's important, students, because once you start pinching out the rim really thin, you start to lose control of the shape of the little bowl you're making. Okay, so I've got this nice little shape here. This hooks under, so this is pretty thin. It feels pretty good, okay? And now I'm gonna set this one over to the side so it's not blocking the camera, and I'm gonna do this a second time. Now, when I'm thinking about these seed pods, or these pumpkins or fruits or acorns or whatever it is you decide to make and whatever you desire to make. I'm thinking about the shapes, and I'm thinking about how they're going to come together, and I'm thinking about if the pods will relate to each other, like if I have a pumpkin and a squash, or if I have an acorn, like 2 acorns side by side of different shape, or maybe I have like a pomegranate that's split open on one side with pomegranate texture, maybe next to a mango or an apple or something. And the assignment is to make 2 of these, but you can make as many as you'd like. I won't stop you. So now I have 2 pinch forms, okay? And I'm gonna open this one up a little bit more. So I can start to match the diameter of this one. So you can see here that this side of the pinch form is a little bit smaller than this side. So I'm going to continue to expand it so I know they'll fit. Good. Now these fit, they're going to come together really well, okay? So I'm not going to put them together yet. They're super soft and they're too wet and they will flop and collapse. So I'm going to go set them out in the sun. Okay, so I sent my pinch pots out in the sun for about 15 minutes, and these are some that I did previously. So these are now leather hard, okay? They're not particularly squishy, they're a little bit stiffer, so I'm able to join them together without them collapsing. How do I join 2 pieces of clay together? Well, you have a couple of methods. The first method is to score it using your serrated rib, the one with the little teeth. And when you score your clay, you want to score it deeply and with intention, okay? So you've got a lot of deep scoring. No surface is untouched, and there's lots of clay boogers. This little side needs some extra. Sometimes I'll use a sharp tined fork, and I will also score in this method. And you might find that you like scoring with a fork just as well as scoring with the serrated rib. So I'm going to do both, okay? Look at that. The surface should be really rough on both sides, okay? So now, I'm going to take my joining slip here. Well, sounds like someone's getting a delivery. And I'm going to put a thick, gushy layer of joining slip on the surface where it is scored. When you apply joining slip, be generous. It's just like caramel sauce on your ice cream sundae. You want a lot of it, okay? So I'm going to take the two sides of my seed pod, and I'm going to squish them and join them together till I see the slip really squish out the sides. Now I'm going to take the back side of my wooden stick and I'm going to blend and knit the two sides of the seed pod together, or the pinch pods, right, that are becoming the seed pod. Doesn't that look really unattractive? It does, because we're only a couple steps into this process. So I'm going to start to shape this form, but the first thing that I need to do now is add a little coil of clay around where the joint is to really secure the two sides together. And because this is so soft, I don't need to put a lot of slip on this still, joining slip. Okay, so I've scored this, I've roughed it up, and now I have this soft little worm of clay here, okay? And I'll roll it just a little bit. Nice soft clay. Okay. And I'm going to take this nice soft clay and I'm going to pinch it onto the form and really fuse those two sides together. I know you're thinking, ew, that looks even worse. But I'll take the edges of that coil and I'll start to blend those two sides together. Just like so. And now I know that they're securely attached and the two pieces will not come apart. But to get the shape of the forms that I'm looking for is going to take a little bit of manipulating the form. So that's where my wooden paddle comes in, okay? So using the side of my wooden paddle or my wooden cooking spoon, I start to beat the shape and start to manipulate it with little pats to get it round and to make the surface come together really well. See how it's starting to come together, look more like a smooth egg? And you want to pay a lot of attention to the form. Keep turning it in your hand. How does it feel? Does the form feel good in your hands? Does it feel bulky on one side? Do you want to flatten it really firmly on one end and then make it really pointy on the other end? Because you're going to make an acorn or a papaya. You can do whatever you want and whatever form you want. The cool thing is that you can paddle this and it won't collapse because you have trapped an air pocket inside your form, so you can hit it as much as you want delicately and the form won't collapse because of that trapped air. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So I am going to take my damp sponge and I'm going to give the surface of my form a little wipe down. And then I'll let this dry a little bit and then I'll put in the texture. Another option that I want to give you students for making your seed pods is to make them so they're just seed pods or some kind of pod that have no rattle to them. But if you want a little bit of extra charm, you can add clay bits on the inside of your piece before you seal them up to create a really charming rattle. The way that you do this is you take little bits of clay and you wrap them in a piece of paper towel. Let me show you how to do that. I just have a little piece of clay here. I pinch off a tiny pea size amount. I have a little piece of paper towel here, and I ball them up, okay? I toss them inside, and I've already made several of these. I have about 4, 5 of them should give you a nice rattle in there. And then you would score your pieces, joining slip them, and stick them together just like you did with the first form. But they'll have the rattle effect inside of them. The paper burns away in the kiln, leaving the clay hardened and rolling around inside to create the rattle. Okay, students, so I'm back here with my nice smoothed out pod form that I made from the 2 pinch pots that I joined together, okay, and paddled. And I set this out in the sun for about 15 minutes after I smoothed it with my damp sponge. And now the surface is dry and it's in a really nice state for me to begin doing some texture to this. So I am going to show you how I make the super cute acorn texture that I have here. And I determine on my form where I'm going to have the acorn cap be. And the acorn cap can be really a big acorn cap and just a little bit of acorn, or I can have a really high acorn cap and lots of acorn, or you can sort of divide it right down the middle if you want. The only thing I suggest is that you stay away from pressing really hard where you join the 2 pieces of clay together, because you don't want to promote those 2 pieces from popping apart in the kiln. So I am going to put my acorn cap right about here, and I'm going to take the back side of my wooden rib, and this is nicely beveled, and I'm going to roll this right around the form until I connect it to the other side. And I'll go again. And then I get this very cute dividing line here. Very nice. Now, with this dividing line, I can then determine texture to put up here and texture to put down here. I like to roll more vertical lines into the form. And I'm not trying to be very symmetrical with all of these lines because this is a real natural, organic form. And the way that you put in pattern and texture should have an organic feeling as well. Now, do these have to be representative of something that exists in nature? They don't have to be. You can make up your own alien or creative seed pod if you want. Okay, I'm gonna roll this and firm it up. So now I have this really nice texture. You will also notice right now that I don't slice through the clay. I don't cut it. I roll the texture into it. And the reason I'm not cutting into the clay is that it makes these sharp burred edges. You will be carving into several of your pieces soon enough. But I am just showing you here that rolling your tool gives you these nice fluted edges. Okay, so I've got this part of my seed pod done. Now I'm going to take my wooden stick and I'm going to use the pointy end of this. And I'm going to start by pressing texture into the cap of my acorn. And I do this in an organic fashion. Okay, so I finished texturizing my little acorn seed pod here. And now I want to add a little stem like this one, and possibly a little leaf to the top of it to kind of complete the aesthetic of the acorn. So I have made a little tiny stem here, if you will. It's a little thicker on one side and a little thinner on the other. And I'm just rolling that so it comes to a little bit of a point that I will attach to the end of my acorn here. I also have my needle tool here, and this is a really handy tool to have for scoring, and you will be using your needle tool quite frequently, so try not to lose it. I've scored the surface, digging in with my needle tool of the top of my acorn, and now I'm actually going to score this little pointy part here and leave the wider point on the top. I'm going to dip this into a little bit of my joining slip so it's got a lot of good slurry on it. And I'm going to press this into the top of my acorn where I scored it a moment ago with my needle. And I'm going to take my damp sponge, boop, boop, okay, and attach my little acorn stem. Now, say I want to add a little leaf to this, or I could even add a little ladybug or a little snail or some sort of natural element if I want to, or even a little mini pine cone or acorn on top. You can use your imagination with this. I have a teardrop shaped piece of clay. And as you can see here, it's about the size of my the top of my thumb. I'm going to flatten this out a little bit so it's soft and flat. And now I have created a really nice soft leaf shape here. I'm going to take my wooden rib again, and I'm going to roll a stem for the leaf right down the middle. And since acorns usually come from oak trees, I'm going to turn this into more of an oak leaf. And the way that I do that is I'll just roll in the edges of the leaf so it has a little bit more of a leafy texture. Okay, now I'm going to set this down here. I'm going to score a little bit more right on the base. Score on the base of my leaf. Add a little bit of joining slip. Wiggle, jiggle, attach. And I have a little leaf attached to the top of my acorn friend. Okay. So now I have a completed seed pod here with attached leaf, little acorn. And this is a wonderful form. And then these would look amazing on inside a bowl on top of your countertop, okay, as like sculptural objects. An important step that we need to add to this video is determining where you're going to put an air release hole in your acorn, okay, or your seed pod. And the air release is important. If you don't put in the air release, your form will explode inside the kiln because the hot air expands, and the only way for it to make room is to blow the piece apart. So I always try and find a spot that's innocuous and out of the way so you don't really notice that there's a hole in your form. So I'm going to lift up the leaf a little bit I'm going to take my needle tool and I'm going to wiggle open an air release hole. Just like that, okay? I can smooth it a little bit, but you definitely need to have a clear passage for air to come out of. And when you're sending me in images of your work and explanations, tell me where the air release hole is in your work so I know to look for it when I see you during greenware drop-off. Okay, so I definitely have an air release hole. It's cleared from the leaf, but it's kind of tucked in there. You can put your air release holes on the side if you need to, okay, and out of the way. This one here has its air release hole on the side as well, okay. So you can find a little spot to put your air release hole. You really only need one, but it needs to be big enough to let the air out. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll see you in the next Zoom.